he ended up like waiting like a whole nother session before he got his gun back, and even then he still shot into combat with little regard to teammates. Ugh. I was so happy when I broke that gun to the point he couldn't fix it. Essentially, he critically failed and he dropped it, and then he got forced back away from where it was. And then Phantasmio used his Staff of Embers, I think it was. He called it the Mortar Staff because he always used it to cast Fireball. And he just lobbed Fireball after Fireball after Fireball into that, like, exact area. Not aiming directly for the gun, but more of the enemies in the area where the gun was dropped. And he just kind of, like, destroyed everything. It's like, well, you find pieces of your gun. He's like, pieces? It's like, well, Phantasmio kind of nuked the spot. Jake ended up going away. Thank God. Then it came to the next campaign, which was actually a continuation of the first one, where they had to, collect these tomes of forbidden knowledge. There's 4 of them, and it turns out that the evil witch from the first campaign didn't really die. They killed her, but it was more of a clone, sort of. She'd used a magic and alchemical set to essentially create a false body, and when that false body died, her spirit returned to her preserved body. I don't know why I'm coughing. So we didn't invite Steve to that one. You can probably imagine why. But yeah, we didn't invite him to that one, and then he showed up wanting to play. At this point, I had gotten my own books. I had everything on PDF, and I didn't need his books. But he showed up anyways, and Salty convinced me that I need to give him one more chance. I was like, okay, fine. So enter Valeri the monk. Valeri was, well, he wasn't that great. In fact, he didn't last that long. He was the shortest lived. He died. He was introduced as a guide and essentially a servant to the group for the area that they had gone to a place called the Aldmeri Empire, somewhere I made up. And the empire kind of ran like ancient Rome, where they had slaves and they worked as slaves until they earned their freedom. And when they earned their freedom, they were no longer whatever they were before. They were Romans. But that was Valeri. That's who he was. Or it might have been Valori. It doesn't matter. So it's like, so you're a slave. He's like, I'm a soldier. I am a soldier. It's like, you're a slave. It's like, no, I am a soldier. And even I said, he's a soldier. He was still working off his time to become a free person, though. But he was a monk, and he was their guide through the Alderi Empire. And essentially, they ran into a very big pickle. See, at the end of the first campaign, a great red dragon had died. This dragon helped them defeat the witch, purely because it suited his own benefits. But he had died fighting against the armies. Essentially, dragon showed up to fight the witch in the small army she, made, and Dragon died fighting her, the armies, and the armies of the nearby city who saw Dragon. So, when they get to the island, it turns out that the witch is a confidant / concubine to the king, and the prince is trying to overthrow the king and get rid of her. So they're helping the prince. He's a total douche nozzle himself, but they're helping him. So they find out that, the witch has 2 of the, tomes of forbidden knowledge. And she's using the 2 of them to resurrect the dragon as a Drago-Lich under her control. So, yeah. The players, they find where the Drago-Lich is, they start, killing the wizards there that are forming him, and they're able to stop the process about halfway through. So there's a completely... they don't know where the phylactery is, but they know that this Gestein has resurrected from the dead and is now a Drago-Lich, and he's only half complete. Like, he's missing large chunks of his body. Like, he's only got one arm and his tail. He doesn't have his other appendages yet. He's got, like, one of his wings. So it's a very hard fight where Phantasmio, it's like, hey, he was the head wizard. Get me the tome off of him. He had one of the tomes. Get it to me, and I can learn how to undo all this. So Valori goes over, and it's like, I want to break his arms. No, Steve, or Valori was his character. He's an old man. If you break his arm, he's probably going to die. He's already bleeding out. Just take his stuff. They began arguing as to what Steve should do on his turn. Again, I'm stressing. So after like 3 minutes of arguing, Steve was like, fine. And then he took everything off the wizard and just left him essentially laying there unconscious, bleeding, and naked. And it's like, we just need his spell component pouch that has the book in it. So then he walks all the way over to Phantasmio and gives him everything but the book. Gives him everything but the book. And he's like, no, I'm going to keep it out of his reach. And it's like, Steve, you're being an asshole again. Well, they won't let me break his arms. It's like, Steve. Okay. So, Phantasmio has to spend a turn snatching the book from him, and then getting further away so that way he can start reading it to try and find a way of, undoing all this. Because it turns out that there was 4 books. 2 of them were, like, part 1, part 2. The 2 were the Book of the Undead. The Witch had 1 book, and they now had the 2nd book. The other 2 books was the Book of Demons and the Book of Realms. The Book of Realms, like, shattered the barrier between realms of existence. And the Book of Demons let you, have full command over demons and devils. Steve ended up going back to fight the still not fully formed Gestein, the Unliving, and Phantasmio was like, well, I still have a standard action. I'm going to cast Scorching Ray, and I'm going to maximize damage with it. I was like, okay, yeah, that's fine. He rolls a 1 with the first ray. I ended up, looking at, the target area, everything. Shot Steve square in the back with a maximized Scorching Ray. I don't remember what level they were, but it was enough damage to put Steve at flat 0. It dropped him from 1 ray. And then the other 2 hit Gestein just fine. Or it might have been just the other one. But I know the other ones hit Gestein just fine. The one drops Steve down to 0. And then I'm like, hey, it's Gestein's turn. He's done with your shit. Breath attack. And he tries to get everyone with the breath attack. Phantasmio's fine because of his fire resistance. What damage he does take, he's able to negate most of it. And then Valori, Steve's character, is just incinerated. Eventually they do defeat Gestein, the Unliving, but they're like, okay, we don't know where his phylactery is. That's going to be something for us to find out. Well, then Steve rolled up a new character named Nikolai, who is a bone oracle, also known as a necromancer. Fast forward. They were going through... excuse me. Losing my voice, huh? They were going to go to another book. Essentially, when they got back to where they originally were, because the entire Aldmeri Empire was being fucked. Because the dragon eventually came back and just started ruining everything. Or Drago Lich came back. Because they still hadn't found his phylactery. Turns out it was the small boy that I put with them. And they didn't figure that out until later, and they really didn't want to kill him. Because they liked him. His name was Benji. But they ended up finding out that two of the other books are, near them. One is a week's way to the north in a town that has been found by the clerics and then, locked away. And it's the Book of the Realms. The other one is the Book of the Demons. No, I'm sorry. Reverse that. The Book of the Demons was to the north, locked up by the clerics. And the Book of the Realms was to the south, currently being held by a whole bunch of wizards who were trying to understand how it works. And so the group was like, well, the Book of the Realms is the biggest threat, because shattering the barrier between realms of existence, you'd have them all merging together, or things pouring over between them and screwing everything up. So yeah, they all decided to go south, except for Steve. He decided to go north. They told him, no, we're going south. And he's like, well, I want to go north. Because one of his things was that he wanted to become a half demon, half god. Well, essentially half god. He wanted to become a half demon, half angel, half dragon thing and overthrow the gods. That was literally all of his characters. Literally all of them. It wasn't just Nikolai, it was Valori and Jake as well. And the fourth guy that I'll get to as well. So he's like, okay, we'll go south. And then as soon as they say, we're all going north, or we're all going south, Steve looks at me and says, in the middle of the night, I leave a note saying that I went ahead going south. I went north. Okay. So the players are like, fine, whatever. Steve's going off on his own. I'm like, great. Now I got to run two separate campaigns at the same damn time. Fine. So the guys going south, they have a wonderful time. They handle this whole situation down there pretty well. They're able to trick the wizards into, fighting amongst each other to where they can steal the book and, get out. Steve, on the other hand, he gets to the town in the north, and, there's a lot of fighting going around. He failed his perception check to see the copious amounts of signs saying, stay out of this area. And, he could tell that, some sort of festival's going on, but there's fighting going on everywhere. And he sees that there's undead over in this one area, and there's a big cask, around them. And then he's like, well, I'm going to light the cask on fire and, with spark and let it explode to kill all the undead. Well, he does that. And all the fighting stops. That's when he sees the sign saying that it was a festival of fights. It was known as the Festivals of Mighty Fists. And essentially the winner got the cask. The town also has an undead problem. Essentially undead are constantly coming out of the crypt and they can't figure out why. But the cask was the grand prize. It was like this very old and perfectly brewed ale that he just exploded. And spectacular. He ended up getting the crap kicked out of him by the villagers and thrown in jail. And he's like, okay, that's not a problem. I can handle this. It's like, really? You can? He's like, yeah. So everyone has a cell. He's like, yep. It's like, I have a cellmate. Yep. Okay. There's guards going by. It's like, yep, there's 3 of them. It's like, okay, I'm going to cast Murderous Command on all 3 guards and have them try and kill each other. Because it's a spell he can cast without, any components. It's like, okay. 2 of them succeed their saves, the last one fail, and the last one is restrained by the other 2. And then Steve is immediately sold out by his cellmate for extra food.